Tonight. My name's Alden Craddock. I'm an associate professor in our School of Education at Maryville University, and I also direct our Center for Civic Engagement and Democracy. Tonight we really have an amazing opportunity to learn not only about Nelson Mandela's legacy of reconciliation, but also what it means in a personal way, and how that relates to personal lived experience. So not only talking about a great man and the great work that he did in his country along with his colleagues, but also what that means among individuals in human relations, and particularly with our guests here tonight. And let me briefly just recognize the other people here on the dais, on the stage with me tonight. Immediately to my left, we have Miss Linda Beale, who's the founder of the Amy Beale Foundation Trust in South Africa and the Western Cape. Next to her is Tobeko Penny, who's the program manager for the Amy Beale Foundation Trust, also in South Africa. And then all the way on the end is our good friend, Manfred Jacobs, who is Communications Club Manager and Senior Correctional Officer of the Drakenstein Correctional Services in Western Cape, South Africa. I mean, you have more titles than I do, and I thought I had the record for that. And that's all I'm going to tell you about their story, because I think it's important for them to share who they are and their story and what brought them all here today. And we're also going to see a video clip in a moment. But each of these individuals has a really unique perspective on the importance and power of reconciliation from their own personal lived experiences and life in South Africa. Tonight, I invite you to hear their stories, and we will hopefully engage you in a discussion of the lessons that we can all learn from their experiences and the legacy of reconciliation that Nelson Mandela left us and left the world. In a few moments, I'll be asking each of our guests to share some of their personal stories and insights on reconciliation, and then we'll have the opportunity for a discussion amongst ourselves, and hopefully with you, we'll be able to get a few questions from all of you about their experiences and what you see and how it connects to your own lives and in reconciliation. We'll end our evening together with a reception where you'll be able to meet our panelists on a more personal level and actually get to hopefully dialogue a little bit more amongst yourselves as well as among all of our guests. So hopefully that sounds interesting and welcoming to all of you, because we certainly want to have that discussion with you and not so much talk at you. I want to also, before we actually begin with our program, I want to recognize Maryville University's Institute of Continuing Studies for their support. And especially Jerry Schultz, who really helped make this happen. I'd also like to recognize Edward Jones for giving us this fabulous facility to share our guests with you. Without their support, we might be cramped up in some other little building somewhere. So really appreciate their efforts on that behalf. I want to also say just a word about the Center for Civic Engagement and Democracy at Maryville that I direct. Really, the center's purpose is to connect what we do at our university to our community, and we do that in lots of ways. And actually here in the audience, one of the ways we're connecting to South Africa and hoping to learn about what's taking place in terms of reconciliation, what's happening in schools and education. I have some teachers from several St. Louis area schools who will be traveling with me in June to South Africa and working in schools in South Africa and with the Ministry of Education there. We'll be happy to be there on Youth Day, so we'll get to work with lots of children. And so this is all part of a larger effort of connecting our university to our community, not just our local community, certainly we want to do that, but also our global community as we think about the impact that a university should have and be involved with in terms of the world. So with that, I'd actually like to start a video to kind of set the ground level understanding of how we're all here today and what really brought these remarkable people together and why their story is so important for us to understand. The context of which that brought these people together is one that's very unique, and some of you may know it, but it really speaks to reconciliation. And their story and their insights are ones I think that has an incredible impact for all of us. So in this short video compilation of clips from ABC show Turning Point, 60 Minutes, another broadcast from 1996, it starts off with an opening with Diane Sawyer introducing Inside the Struggle, the Amy Beale story. And just for the moment of drama, I'd like for the story to tell itself, because I think that's probably the best way to introduce our guests. So with that, if we could go ahead and start the clip.
Left all this for this. An all-American honors student on a courageous journey to a land of revolution and unmarked graves.
I told her often enough that, Amy, you do things that I would never do. I wouldn't go in there.
She came to fight racism, but died for the color of her skin.
She was truly part of us, and she didn't deserve to die like she did.
It's a country where 16,000 gave their lives.
Amy was 16,001.
Tonight, her family's emotional journey to a world they never knew.
I now know what it feels like to be hated sheerly because of race.
To make a difficult decision.
You kind of lose the anger and it just turns to sadness.
And discover a daughter they never imagined.
I was in awe of my daughter, how she affected people halfway around the world, and how they were celebrating her life.
The inspiring story of Amy Beale.
Turning Point, tonight, Inside the Struggle, the Amy Beale story.
Good evening, I'm Diane Sawyer. Amy Beale was like a lot of young women you may know, smart, vibrant, with a terrific sense of humor. But from the time she was in high school, she developed a passion that would eventually carry her halfway around the world to fight and die for freedom. 3 years ago, when we first broadcast this program, her parents were just beginning to cope with her tragic death, learning about a daughter they never knew, and the country that inspired her. Last month, they returned to South Africa to do something I'm not sure many parents in the same situation could do. I'll tell you about the amazing decision they made later. But first, Don Cladstrup has the inspiring story of Amy Beale, a story that began just as South Africa was emerging from decades of oppression.
Good evening. The brutal murder of American exchange student Amy Beale in Gugulethu near Cape Town last night has been condemned across the political spectrum.
Meanwhile, 2 party members have been arrested in connection with the murder of Miss Beale, who had a high profile among organizations struggling for an emerging democracy in South Africa.
She was only 26. She had gone to South Africa because she wanted to help.
Amy Elizabeth Beale was born April 26, 1967. That's not very long ago, is it? She's survived by Linda and Peter, her parents, Kimberly, her sister, Molly, her sister, and Zachary, her brother.
Molly got the news first.
The State Department called me at my office, and having this woman say, well, something bad has happened, are you sitting down? And I said, is she dead? Yes, she's dead. What happened?
It happened along this road, in the black township of Gugulethu, when a mob of 30 youths attacked Amy as she was driving 3 friends home. The group began throwing stones, shattering her windshield. Amy jumped from her car, ran toward this gas station, but the mob caught her. They bludgeoned her with bricks, and then stabbed her to death. Her father, Peter, thinks about it every day.
There are many horrible ways to die, but that has to be among the most frightening. It kills me, tears me up that she had to go that way.
Murdered only 2 days before she was due to leave South Africa, where she had been working as a Fulbright scholar.
I was going to ask Amy to marry me today. I don't regret not having asked her before.
The time was never right before. In the last letter that she wrote to me, she told me 1 year isn't so long in the big picture. How could we have known? How could I have known?
But Amy knew there was danger. She was acutely aware that behind the breathtaking beauty of this land is another picture, one not so pretty, one filled with pain and despair. This is the South Africa that moved Amy most, touched her, inspired her, before she was killed.
Amy's friends and colleagues also know that behind her beautiful face and inside her beautiful little body was the heart of a warrior.
As condemnation of the mob killing of Amy Beale poured in this afternoon, at least 10 more people were killed in violent incidents around the country. KwaZulu police reported 2 people shot dead at Umlazi, while at eZekheni, the ANC reported 4 people killed when gunmen opened fire on residents.
Nearly 4 years after their daughter was stabbed and beaten to death in a South African township, the parents of Amy Beale met the mother of one of her killers and told her they would not oppose his application to be freed from jail. Peter and Linda Beale's arrival at the tiny concrete blockhouse in the black township of Guguletu was a moment packed with emotion.
Don't cry.
Yeah,
Don't cry.
Everyone marvels at it.
The logic would be that the South Africans should be giving some kind of reparation to the Beales.
Instead of what's happening.
They've turned it all upside down. I mean, it's all sort of topsy-turvy. It is the victims, in the depth of their own agony and pain, who say the community which produced these murderers, we want to help that community be transfigured.
The Beales have what South Africans call Ubuntu.
I say, unobuntu. That person has the essence of humanity. Ubuntu speaks of generosity, of warmth, of hospitality, of compassion, of caring.
So as you can tell, the story of the tragic death of Amy Beale is something that is very personal in many ways, but also speaks to reconciliation and to hope for many people. And I think Desmond Tutu said it best, is that it turns the world upside down when we think about this event. And there's no better person to really speak to that and how that came about and how you can reach that place and what reconciliation means than Linda Beale herself. And Linda, if you'd mind, come up and share a few words with our group.
Am I on mic? I am mic'd. I pardon me for my allergic throat. I'll do my best. Wow, every time I see that, I go back and I think what I didn't know. I knew a lot. I don't like it when Diane, they edit these things, right? And I don't like it when Diane Sawyer says, a daughter I didn't know. I knew my daughter. I didn't know everything she was doing. But the magic about Amy is in the 80s when everyone, how many of you here were involved in the struggle, in anti-apartheid activities? You were aware of what was going on. Well, there were university students all over this country who were trying to get their institutions. Amy was at Stanford. They must divest of their interest in that country because of apartheid. She talked about it all the time. And Mandela was still in prison. She used to write notes. We didn't have all the email and all that. We actually wrote letters and postcards, and she'd always sign, "Free Nelson Mandela." when she graduated from Stanford in 1989, and my mother-in-law was sitting there having a panic attack. But out comes Amy, free Mandela on her graduation cap. That was Amy. And she was bound and determined with their academic background, because that's very key. I think there are a lot of people that have very big hearts. But I also think when you're stepping into some situations, you really need to have a good academic foundation of what is going on. And that's what I think what Maryville is doing in these programs is really important. But very few things deterred Amy from what she had set her mind to from the time she was this big to her death when she was 26, which was over 20 years ago now. Desmond Tutu himself has taught me a lot. I feel he's been my mentor. And one of the things he has taught me, and I see it in action, is you've got to have a sense of humor. You really do. You have to feel that life has joy in it. And he is one of the funniest guys I know. So you can laugh with me. You don't have to cry with me. I want to set that scene because that takes you back, and it just sounds horrible. The life that these young people that you saw in the film, the children, what they were looking at, the dead bodies, it's all horrible. But they have hope. They have hope. Their country was fighting for those children, and Amy knew it. So a lot of what you're going to hear about tonight has to do with spirit and hope, and Ubuntu is a very good word to use. We are all in this together. So tonight, I actually hope that you will see with these two young gentlemen, and I do like, this is my Tutu humor, I do like to surround myself with young men, okay? My late husband passed away 12 years ago, and I have a lot of friends, including Desmond Tutu, have said, hey, do you have a man in your life? I'm like, yeah, there are lots of nice young men in my life. So with these young people and who they are now, where they came from, their journeys are equally as important as my journey. My journey of 20 years has been pretty interesting, let me tell you. A lot of things in this I will look at and say, but that's not true, and that's not true. But at the time, you know, and the editing, you see a film that sounds horrible and tragic. But South Africa, even though it went through horrible, tragic times, and the system of apartheid was just insane cruelty to its people, it has come out of it amazingly well. And that's, I think, the spirit of Amy. But when she wore that hat at graduation, Free Nelson Mandela, I think we also knew that there are pretty special people in this world. And Nelson Mandela's legacy, when I met him and you saw my daughter and I standing there, it was in front of the prison where he was released, where Manfred is now working. So life comes together in mysterious ways, right? We all have our journeys, and we never know sometimes where those journeys will lead and where they will take us. I think the secret to things like Mandela and his comrades in arms, who people thought, you know, this is a terrorist on this side. The other people thought, no, this is a freedom fighter. But the secret is in being a human being. And a human being lives with other human beings. And we have to learn sometimes. I think as children, we know it and we lose it. So trying to come back together again. So this is a story about reconciliation. It's about coming together in mysterious ways, things we wouldn't expect. So in this little evening, we hope that you will share with us. But I have to really share a very special person with you all. And his name is Tobacco Penny. He's sitting there in the green sweater. When they were talking about there were maybe 30 youth in a mob, there were way more than that. It was a way of life in the townships. And Tobacco was there that day. He was there as a young freedom fighter in his own right. He took accountability for being a part and involved in Amy's death. He was sentenced in the court trial along with 3 others to prison for 18 years for murder and public violence. He also then was one of the four of them, and he was one of the four, who applied to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. How many of you have heard of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? It was an amazing thing that South Africa decided to approach healing that country by creating a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was about restoring harmony, restoring justice, reconciling one enemy to another. One of Mandela's quotes is about, you need to know your enemy. You need to learn about your enemy. You need eventually to work with your enemy. Now, how many people can say that? Can we get to know our enemy? Can we work, negotiate? I mean, his story about negotiation and getting to know someone who represented all the evil that he could imagine, but the two of them coming out right there at Victor Verster prison at the time could negotiate a process that led to both of them receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. I think there are very few stories as compelling as Nelson Mandela's story and his comrades in South Africa. I think we can learn from it. So Tobacco tonight is here, and he's going to tell you about himself. You know, what was he doing when Amy was growing up? How old are you now? Ah! I think you were born in 1973. Am I right?
Yes.
Does that get you around 40? Okay. Oh, wow. You can see the relationship with him. I mean, it's always difficult, but it's always fun. No, it's been a journey. And I really think he needs to come up here and tell you a little bit about his journey. Tobacco, would you come up and do that, please?
I'm going to put you on spotlight.
Thank you. Okay.
Are you leaving?
I'm going to be back.
Okay.
Oh, you want me to stay here beside you? Yes. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Evening, everybody. I'm not going to be long. Mr. Jacob sitting there, we've just made a deal. He said I must spare some of my time to him. If I don't stick to the end of my deal, I'm afraid he might lock me back when I get home. And being a husband and a father of 3 girls, I cannot afford to be locked back. As you've seen in the video, we never led a very normal lifestyle. At a very young age, at the age of 7 years, it was a norm for us to be able to go to school without a lunchbox. There was only one thing that we couldn't afford to go to school without. That would be a Vaseline.
You know, a little Vaseline jar.
So that whenever the police will be shooting tear gas, we will have that. Even when you get to your school gates and you don't have that in your pocket, you have to make sure by the time you get to the classroom, you have something for you. We always had money bags, not to keep money, but to keep the Vaseline in there. Because if you have that, it can stay there forever. Unfortunately for my elementary school, we were sharing a fence with the high school. And there were always uprising in the high school. And when the police come from the police station, it did not matter what age you were in. Because they were not so sure who was involved, who was not, who's at high school, who's at elementary. So whenever they come out, they'll be able to shoot at anyone. As young people, we did not know. For us, at some point, it was fun. We were laughing at high school students being shot at with some pellet guns, you know. So it was fun. But as we're growing up, we realized there was nothing fun in what we're witnessing. We had the responsibility to pull those who were shot down into safety. Back then, we never even had TVs, but we had learned what happened, that check their pulse if they are still alive or not. At the age of 7, we will do exactly that, because we could see from others that they'll pull them to safety. So we learned to do that at that early age. So we couldn't wait to get to high school to be directly involved in politics. Because at elementary schools, as we were growing up, we could not in any way be part of that. We were never afraid of death from that age. So that's the society that we're raising. Most people, when I come across them, say they tend to think people became prepared to take lives. No, it does not work. It works the other way around. We were prepared to give our lives for the cause. And in the process of that, we became unknowingly prepared to kill for the cause. Because many young people were shot and killed on a daily basis. Amy Bill's death was not planned. But everything else in 1993 was thoroughly planned. Amy Bill died under Operation Great Storm. That was to make South Africa totally ungovernable.
The Operation Great Storm was all over the country. It wasn't just the Western Cape, or was it just in the Western Cape?
We wanted white people to feel how it is not to feel safe in your own neighborhood, how it is not to be able to go on with your life as if there were no injustices in this country. So going for a Saturday swim, bowling club, golf courses, it became extremely difficult because Operation Great Storm targeted all those areas of privileges. So as I've said earlier on, Amy's death was not planned, but everything else was thoroughly planned. If we were to be shot and killed, arrested, in every groups, there were people with responsibility to relay information to senior leaders that we have 5 members shot and killed, we've got 2 members or 10 members arrested, and they will dispatch lawyers to go and post the bail. So everything was thoroughly planned. So that was Operation Great Storm. Very much belonging to, I will say, the leftists, the radicals. We very much hope that the release of the former late state president, we were hoping with his incarceration for 27 years, he'll be extremely bitter, and he will say, let's continue with armed struggle. We were disappointed. I was disappointed. However, I am grateful that he made that call, and nobody defied him. I value the time I spent in prison simply because it offered me an opportunity to reflect, look at things differently, look at what the ANC stood for and what the PAC stood for. And I had come to realize that there was no disparity, because it was a question of reading a book written by Macbeth or Shakespeare. It was the same English. One version was very short, the other version was just very long. So the policies were one and the same. It was during that time in prison that I was able to read through both constitutions to realize there was no difference.
He was a Pan-African Congress member. Mandela was an African National Congress leader. The Pan-African Congress student groups were encouraged by their leadership. It was a small party. They felt that the ANC, under their leadership, were selling their country out. So although the ANC had gone into all these negotiations and were planning a peaceful transformation, the PAC didn't want any part of it. So being caught as a lifelong, oath of allegiance member to the Pan-African Congress, they were incited by their political leadership to go forward with this great storm. It was really to take the war to the people, where they were celebrating their lives and having fun for the privileged. So this was really the essence of what was happening alongside of what most of us saw in the world as Mandela in his freedom and his preparing to become president of the country. But a lot of us didn't know what was happening going on the ground.
Well, we had a very beautiful process, which was totally imperfect, which was known as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. One of the processes which we as combatants just did not want to be part of, but simply because we're still under the oath of allegiance, we were instructed to go, and our position in that process was not to ask for forgiveness, but to put our political line across why we had to kill white people. Unfortunately, we had this belief that the process was there to continue to crucify others who continued to fight for the independence after the release of the former state president. However, the process was not set up for any crucifixion. That came as a surprise. It was surprising to come across the Bill family who supported the process, having lost their child. And as I've said earlier today, I still say that today, for me, I just did not recognize them as biological parents, because should I have lost my child, there's just no way I would have supported the process, including the release of those who were involved in the death of my child. Unfortunately, the reality is they were biological parents, and Amy was not an adoptee. It was during that process that I met the Bill family. It was after the process that we were able to continue with a personal friendship, which is known as the reconciliation. The process was formal, but outside the formal process, we were able to sort of continue on our own after the process. Yeah.
And I just want to add, and he's going to share more with you, he is the project manager, the Amy Beal Foundation today. He has been helping in his community, helping young kids today fulfill the dreams that they have. And he will tell you more about that later.
I gave you enough time.
And now it's my, my great pleasure to introduce a new friend who is roughly the same age as Tobacco, living some of the same experiences, but ending up perhaps in a completely different place in terms of South Africa. Mr. Manfred Jacobs, as I introduced earlier, has worked as a correctional officer at Drakenstein Correctional Services, actually earlier known as formerly the Victor Verster Prison in Western Cape, South Africa, and actually had the opportunity to meet and know to some degree Nelson Mandela during his imprisonment there. And so I'd like to invite Manfred to come up and say a few words about your experience in terms of reconciliation in your country, and also what it means to be someone of the same generation, and what life meant to you at this time.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. In my country, we simply say, all protocol observed, then we don't have to greet everybody. Now, before I start, I was thinking of, what the great Napoleon used to say. He said that the world suffers a lot, not because of the violence by the bad people, but because of the silence by the good people. And indeed, we as a young generation, we made a decision way back. We dare not to be silent. We need to speak up. At a time when we spoke, it was perhaps violent. Now it's a different form. Today I want to stand before you not to tell you about me, but I want to share with you how Madiba, our beloved former president Nelson Mandela, how he changed the life of the very people who guarded him at the time. My ex-colleagues, and today some of them my colleagues. And I know because of time, I will just perhaps tell you a few things. When he came to Victor Verster prison, today Drakenstein, it was only white Afrikaans-speaking male officials allowed to work with him, to guard him. And at the time, of course, very much hostile towards him. But over a course of 14 months, everything simply changed. Madiba would simply go to the guys and said to them, I heard it's your birthday, or I heard it's your wife's birthday. And he said, here's a card that I made. And he gave them a card with a nice message in their own language, Afrikaans. Second time around, he will go to the guy and say, I believe you are studying. Please use this book or do the calculation this way around. One day, he approached one of those officials. By then, this guy was in charge of a group of personnel. That was in '89. He said, officer, the past few months I witnessed, you have a lot of potential, but I heard you only have grade 8 or standard 8 at a time. He said, please don't be satisfied. Study, obtain your degree. This guy was so cross. How dare you? You're not my equal. I will charge you for this. Mind your own business. Very rudely. Madiba was shocked because it was a friendly gesture. Years later, 1996, Madiba returned to us, this time, however, as the president of our country. He stopped at our access gate. We were all there lined up, ready to meet him. He came and shook our hands. Then he went and addressed us after Madiba spoke. That same gentleman that was so rude many years ago stood up. He said, please allow me to say something today. I thought, please don't go there. You know, they allowed him. He said, today I am an assistant director. I'm the head of the personnel corps here, and I have 2 degrees behind my name. And he pointed to Madiba and said, you inspired me. And that gentleman, white official, is still contributing wonderfully towards our management area, towards our prison. A second gentleman, quickly, his name is Jack Swart. Now, Jack Swart became the cook, the chef of Nelson Mandela at the Victor Verster house. But before he became the cook, way back at Robben Island as a young official, his job was to drive the lorry between the prison and the quarry, and his instructions were, drive as reckless as you can in order to hurt them at the back. He said to me, Manfred, many a day I aimed for the speed bumps. They fell from the one side to the other side. He said, one day I drove so recklessly, Madiba sitting at the back, knocked on the window and told me, can't you drive better? We need a pack of corn. Jack said, I just glanced at him and kept on driving. Years later, 1988, let me tell you, Jack Swart, they brought him to Victor Verster prison. They introduced him to Nelson Mandela and told him, this will be your cook. Madiba started to laugh. They asked, why are you laughing? He looked at Jack Swart and said, officer, I hope you will be a better cook than you were a driver. You know, Jack said, I thought surely this man will get me back because we really ill-treated the man. On the contrary, let me tell you, over that 14 months, they became like this. Madiba actually said he was like a younger brother to me. A week after the former President de Klerk announced that Madiba will be released, he approached Jack Swart. He said, officer, I don't know what will happen now, but one day if I'm lucky enough to become president of this beautiful country, I would so much like that you and your wife spend that special moment with me. You know, the very same guy that also urinated on the former president. Well, 10 May 94 came, he was inaugurated as our first democratically elected president. Jack Swart and his wife, they were there amongst all those dignitaries. Your former President Clinton was there as well. He was a warrant officer, a low-rank officer. When he left, he came back as a lieutenant. Today, Jack Swart, Uncle Jack for me, is in retirement. But in my short lifetime, I never personally came across a guy more humble than Jack Swart. He has so many stuff and so many stories that he can sell to the world. He chose not to. He's actually delivering medication at a pharmacy in a small village called Kuilsriver for a living. And that's the Jack Swart. There are many stories, but let me just say, many people ask me, because we have a nice program that we run a tour through the Mandela House, and they ask me, what is the legacy of Madiba? You know? And it's difficult to respond to that question. So I tell the following story. You might know the story. I customize it a bit just to fit my purpose. It's about a man who died, and he appeared in front of an angel. And he asked the angel one question. Is there a difference between heaven and hell? He said, of course there is. He said, take me there, I want to see for myself. The angel took him to a house with only 2 rooms. When they entered the first room, in the center of that room was a pot of food, most delicious. But around the spot of food, people stood all over, tied to both hands long spoons, too long they could not feed themselves. So they ended up being hungry. He said, this is hell. They went next door, the same scenario. Pot of food, people all around, long spoons tied to their hands. But guess what? They were well fed. They were joyful. He said, hey, I'm confused. He said, keep on looking. Well, the difference was the last group have learned to feed each other. You know, and everybody was fed. The first group, me, myself, and I. Now, why do I tell you this? Madiba said, it was never about me. He said, it's how you respond to the needs of other people. In fact, he told us, big doors hang on small hinges. If you prepare to serve other people with clean hands and a pure heart, without expecting anything in return, that door will naturally also open to you like it did for him. Let me also tell you, 1996, the South African Rugby Board took Madiba to court for something like we call rugby. We said, look at the arrogance of these white people. How can they take the president to court for something as trivial and simple and undeserving as rugby? He said, why not? Let me go. He went 3 times that day. The judge asked him, Mr. President, can you please sit down? After the 3rd attempt, he asked the judge, do you normally ask the people who stand here to sit down? He said, no. He said, please don't treat me differently. And he remained standing. When he turned 92, a good friend, attorney of old, George Bigos, brought him some gifts. He said, thank you, Georgie. I know you mean well, but I don't want this. If you truly want to do something for me, build a school. And if you're rich enough, build a school and a clinic. When he turned 90, 2008, I will never forget that. On national television, and I mentioned it earlier this morning, they interviewed ordinary South Africans. One question, what is your wish or gift for Madiba on his 90th birthday? Everybody said something. The day when I looked, they interviewed a 9-year-old white girl. Same question. What is your wish or gift for his 90th birthday? This 9-year-old looked straight into the cameras. He said, I just want to give back the 27 years that he spent in prison. That day I realized this is where we ought to be. This is the legacy of Nelson Mandela, where you simply can just give, simply just not take anything for granted. I remember how people raise money, including in their own country, for the cause. And there was the school in Canada. They managed to raise a few hundred Canadian dollars, less than 300 Canadian dollars. 1992, Madiba went back to that school just to say thank you, not taking anything for granted. For now, I want to end up with this one story, if I like. I'm not sure the time. I have a very good friend in Cape Town who had this wonderful opportunity to accompany Madiba on most of his trips. A lot of pictures and video images. And one day, his name is Benny. I one day went to Benny's office and I asked him, Benny, out of all of these pictures and video images, surely there must be that one Kodak moment, that special moment. Benny said, yes, Manfred. But instead of telling me what it was, he asked me to go downstairs again. I thought, are you nuts? But I went. Came back the second time because there was nothing down there. Came back. Just before I turned into his office, there was a big poster of a white 12-year-old boy. But this boy, let me tell you, he was blind. And in front of him, Nelson Mandela bending, almost make a fool of himself, just for the boy to touch his face, just to get a feeling of who this man was. Benny came out of his office, he said, Manfred, that's my Kodak moment. I thought that was fantastic. July 2012, I went to Johannesburg to address children on the Nelson Mandela subject. And I naturally said the story of Benny. The moment I did it, a 16-year-old white girl started to cry. I thought, wow, did I upset you? She said, no, sir. Let me tell you something. The boy in that picture was my brother. Guys, let me just say to you, Nelson Mandela means a lot to us. Nelson Mandela taught us, he said, courage is not the absence of fear, but it is the ability to go on in spite of fear. And that is what we need to do. This is the legacy that we need to spread. This is what we want to do to keep it alive, to build on it. He never claimed to be a saint. He never claimed to be perfect because nobody is perfect. He made a lot of mistakes, and he would admit when he made mistakes. We admit, and here's my friend and my colleague, he admitted they made mistakes. I made many mistakes. I was just not caught. Here I am today as a correctional officer. I'm also a pastor in my community, and I'm there to say the wonderful message, to tell we need to work together. We need to bring all people of this rainbow nation, which the great arts, Desmond Tutu said, the rainbow nation. We need to work together. We have on our money, we have the motto saying, and it's in one of the indigenous language, say ka karate e. It means diversity is our unity, or unity in our diversity. And this is exactly, we are so different, but being different, we can achieve so much as long as we respect one another, as long as we can make a room for each other. And I think it's a great occasion to tell you, never stop doing good, because at the end of the day, I can tell you, you will get a wonderful reward. Perhaps not here, but you will get the reward. Thank you. Thank you.
So actually, are you fine right now? Okay, Linda, glad you're doing well. Actually, let me I want to ask a couple of questions to start our discussion about reconciliation and the experiences of our panelists, and then we'll open it up to all of you, give you a moment to think about some things that are on your mind. Let me actually start with Rebecca. And I'd like to ask you about from your experience through all of these events, your life experiences, your experience of working with the Beale family. What's the meaning for reconciliation? How does that come through in terms of your work with the Amy Beale Foundation Trust?
First, before the Amy Beale Foundation work, if it was not for the reconciliation process gave me an opportunity to go an extra mile talking and engaging with Amy's parents. That on its own gave me an opportunity to find ways and means to forgive myself. Because people look from an end where you were a perpetrator, you have injured and killed and troubled others, but in the process people fail to look into. I have also troubled myself in the process because my parents raised me. They made efforts that I go to school. They tried their level best not to be too involved into politics. But my grandfather always said, whose child has to be involved in politics if not ours? Because they knew the price was dead, you know. So I was able to find means and ways to forgive myself. Because as much as I was given amnesty, people tend to think while you're out of prison, you should be free and you're a free bird, you should fly. That's not necessarily the case, because I had a past that I had to deal with. Unfortunately, this past was not like a school bag where you come back from school on a Friday, toss it away, go have a weekend away, you know. It's something that you had to deal with. And in order to be okay with what I have done, I had to jump into the shoes of being a militant to justify my actions and to be okay with it. Apparently, the gas station where Amy was killed, it's 2 minutes away. I find myself avoiding that route, but I had to come into terms with it. So this relationship offered me an opportunity and encouraged me to face the facts and admit certain things will not change. There's nothing as painful as when the country goes to reconstruction and development and you realize there's something that you took away and you cannot give back. There's very few people that will understand what a person goes through when we're sitting with that guilt. So this reconciliation process, which was one-on-one, gave me enough courage to be who I am today and to share the story so that people, especially young people, will not repeat certain mistakes that were done in the past. People could learn and adopt this story and its examples in many different scenarios.
But he's a living example. He's out in his community. He lives in his community. He's working with the kids in his community. He's raising 3 amazing daughters. And he wanted a son, but you know, I think there was, when they were released from prison, my late husband and I were in California, but we were called by the press, and our statement was, we hope the community and their families would welcome them back and support them, because there weren't processes in place for rehabilitation. So we also said, we hope the spirit of Amy would be with them. Well, Amy's spirit in the Amy Beale Foundation, the work with the children and the other activities that go on, is best exemplified by this young man. And he was asked once by a reporter, he said, have you ever looked Mrs. Beale in the eye and said, I'm sorry? And we both kind of laughed after we talked about that, because he hasn't. He doesn't need to. He does it every day. He's making the changes that need to be made now and for a long time to come. His children will. That's reconciliation and beyond.
And Manfred, I wonder, I mean, that's a very powerful moment to speak about not having to say I'm sorry, because you've reached a place of understanding and reconciliation with what the events in your life. Did that play out for President Mandela too, in terms of his experience in the prison?
Yeah, certainly. You know, in prison we have what we call victor-offender dialogue. Now, it's important to bring people together, and I think, let me just say, personally, I remember the day when Madiba went to the office, or he made an appointment with the judge who sentenced him at the time, and he went there and he personally asked, please forgive me. You know, he went to a very conservative village, what we call Oranje, in the Northern Cape, where there's a big statue of the person who introduced apartheid to our country, Hendrik Verwoerd. He spent some quiet time there, and then he walked over to the house of the widow of Hendrik Verwoerd, Betsy Verwoerd. And they talked, they apologized, they cried, both of them. And for a moment, the people of that village realized this is also our leader. 4 months later, he had former President P.W. Botha don't want to talk at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He went down to the city of George, tried to convince P.W., said, please reconsider. This is important for the healing of this nation. Don't fear prison, because we will grant you amnesty, but everything must be out in the open. Former President Botha said, no way. I won't tell you anything. I will rather die. Madiba came back to the structures, informed us at the time. We all said, put him in jail. Do this, do that. He then said, hold your horses. Just look back what we already achieved. He said, really worth it? At least for my sake, leave him alone. And I think there are many other examples how there was no reason for him to say sorry, in my opinion at least. He was the first one to say, I made mistakes, you know, and I want to take the first step. And this is what we ought to do sometimes. We need to go and personal restoration and forgiveness is a very strong thing. And that's why victims and the perpetrators, we need to bring them together. But it's painful. It's not so easy. I mean, if your loved one were killed, you know, and brutally killed, like we saw, it's not easy just to let go. But sometimes in life, and I want to make this analogy, we have certainly here, but in South Africa, we have the banks, the commercial banks, where you can't open the door in front of you if you don't close the one behind you. And that is life. If you cannot progress if you don't close the one behind. You need to let bygones be bygones. This is what Madiba taught us. Leave what is in the past, then you will be freed. Madiba said, and it was also on your screen, if I walk out of prison still being bitter, still being angry, I will still remain a prisoner. So we need to let go. And here are the example. He's a true hero. She's a true hero in my book, certainly. And I think they need an applause, if I may. Thank you.
And, you know, it makes me wonder, what would have happened if you didn't have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? What would South Africa, I mean, what impact do you see that it had on the overall country? I mean, we can certainly see what it means in individual relationships, but as the overall country, you know, what came out of that you can point to and say that this was really, if we hadn't had the Truth and the TRC, then we wouldn't have this in our society today?
Let me just say, for many people, it brought closer. For many people, it was a platform just to vent, just to say, I want to know where's the remains of my child. I want to know what happened with my child, with my husband, what happened with my wife. And there was this platform, not to be angry, not to get revenge, but I just want to know. I want to get closer. And that process really assisted our country. You know, many people walk out there angry. Let's be frank, they walk out there angry. But for many, they got closer. And they said, now I can at least, I know, you know, I have peace of mind and I can move on. So certainly it was a wonderful platform, and it proved to be the right thing that Madiba introduced.
Well, many academics have been studying the effects of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think Amy probably would have. You know, that was kind of what she did. It's very hard to really, I think, identify, even today, what it did do to the country. I think if they hadn't gone to this restorative justice approach and went to a retributive kind of justice like the Nuremberg trials, that the country would not be where it is today. I couldn't tell you exactly why, but every Sunday night during the trial, during the amnesty hearings and whatnot, The storytelling, people got a chance, as you say, a platform to come and tell their story. And it was complicated. There were many different parts of the TRC, but they could go forward and be respected. Sometimes people weren't respected when they tried to tell their story or wouldn't listen to. They were listened to when they went before the TRC. And on Sunday nights, they televised the proceedings. And there were so many people who have come up to me personally, have said, you know, your story was very sad, and we all read about your story, that white girl that was killed here. And now we're hearing about the stories that happened to our own people of South Africa. Because Amy always said, when a white person was killed, there was the obituary, there was a name, there was headlines. And when blacks were killed, it was numbers. No name, just a number. And she always said if something happened to her, she'd rather be a number than a name. I think the TRC has given people back their name.
And Tobacco, you know, you had mentioned that being part of the PAC, you weren't really looking forward to reconciliation. What were you looking forward to as a PAC?
Initially, as a movement, we were not there to be apologetic. We were there to put the line across that what happened had to be done in order to retain what was rightfully ours. But during the process itself, as an individual, it sort of influenced me in a totally different way. Coming face to face with the Bill family, listening to their presentation, that had a huge impact in my turning point.
And the PAC's position now?
I'm no longer affiliated to any political party, and I don't even follow a single movement. I follow politics generally.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I do not want to be tied down to any oath of allegiance again.
I guess what makes me wonder about, this is the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Movement here in the Civil Rights Act. Actually, I should be more specific, the Civil Rights Act, the passage of the Civil Rights Act here in the United States. And I don't believe we ever had the reconciliation process. And I think it's hurt us as a nation because, as you said, it's kind of hard to close that door to move forward. And without that reconciliation process, I think a lot of people just don't want to experience and feel the hard and do the hard work and confront the real troubles that we face. So I don't want to monopolize our guest time. I want to open this up now to more of a discussion among our audience and among all of you. Is there anyone who has a question? We have a few people with microphones on either side, so if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Just go ahead right there, Tom. Please identify yourself, and you know, if you're addressing one of us or all of us, please just make sure of that.
Well, my name is Bob Duchateau. I'm visiting St. Louis, as I do often, from Arkansas. And my question is really for Mrs. Beal. I just wondered how soon, if that's the correct way of stating it, after Amy's death, did you and your husband kind of make the decision that you were going to be vehemently anti-apartheid and you were going to really make Amy's legacy be peace and reconciliation? How long did it kind of take you to get to that moment?
Thank you, because part of that, you know, really relates to who Amy was, and I tell people, particularly students, when I'm with them from young ages, converse with your family, converse with your friends, keep journals, tell people how you feel about things. Don't keep it to yourself and go out and join a group. If Amy hadn't explained to us some of the things that she felt about South Africa and experienced in South Africa and kept us informed, 5 minutes after her death, when I got a call from a reporter in Johannesburg asking me what I thought, trying to get me to be angry and bitter, her words came through. She said, oh, when Chris Hani was killed in April, assassinated, he was a leader that she was interested in, and how it happened and what an awful day it was, and how many hundreds of thousands of young, particularly males, the angry young lions and the youth, were going to be affected by his death. Oh, I started talking about Chris Honey. I started talking about things that maybe under normal circumstances I wouldn't have remembered. It was her wisdom that kind of really got us through that. It was also a sense of Mandela himself. She honored him, and we felt that we did have choice. Yes, we did have choice. But we felt as a family, and we were all in different parts of the country. My husband was on a business trip. One daughter was in Washington. We all met together at our house that night, and we said, we have some decisions to make because there's satellite TV in front of our house. What are we going to do? And we decided we were going to support the process that South Africa was undertaking to achieve the country that we all wanted to see happen, including Amy, including Nelson Mandela. And so we just tried to speak openly and honestly. People often say, did you have closure? We'll say, well, maybe after this interview we can go on with our own lives. Oh, was this closure? Was it trial closure? Oh, well, maybe go on with our own lives. But we got sucked into this thing, and it kept growing. We kept talking. We never really stopped talking. So I would say the circumstance led to almost an immediate understanding of this. But I can't say that's going to happen in all cases.
Other questions? Please go right ahead. Again, please identify yourself and direct your question to whomever.
Yeah, my name is Godwin Dovlo. I'm with African Diaspora Council. I'm glad to be here. And I just want to make a comment about what you said about it's been 50 years since the Civil Rights Act was passed. But you asked the question, looks like reconciliation, have we achieved that? And you shook your head. Yeah, but it's a process. So that is why Mandela's legacy needs to continue. We of African Diaspora Council, we are trying to have our inauguration in July on the 18th, which is Nelson Mandela's birthday. We're going to have a peace walk, which we term Peace and Reconciliation Walk. So that is the process. Yeah. So I just want to bring it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Other questions, comments?
Yes, my name is Arnold Kaplan, and I'm just a citizen. The issue that you're talking about, well, what I think all the press were doing was they realized that the most typical reaction would have been rage and the desire for vengeance. And as you describe the way you got over, did you feel that rage? But I'm assuming you did, but you might not have. But as you, okay, you seem to have reached this decision through a process, a thought process. But I saw in these cuts, maybe it was wrong, that there was a lot of emotional changing that had to go on and relational changing. So was that part of it?
Wow. You're asking me to dig a little deeper maybe, huh? It, of course, was emotional. But my late husband and I grew up together in a small town outside of Chicago, Geneva, Illinois. We grew up with very similar backgrounds, and we had sort of this same outlook on how to raise our children. A lot of people used to say, when Amy was doing all of her South African stuff and going over working in Africa and whatnot, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid? And when she got her Fulbright to go for 10 months and she was getting ready to go on the plane and I wouldn't see her ever again, I didn't know that at the time, she said, "Mom, don't cry." She was captain of the Stanford diving team, and her diving coach, they won the national championship, and she wasn't the best driver. diver, but her diving coach said when she was a walk-on up there, I talked to her on the phone, he says, don't let your daughter cry. Who cried at her memorial service at Stanford? He did. No, it was kind of in a very strange sense. Amy had weird things that happened in her life. She had a big fire in April of 1989. She was due to graduate in June. She had prepared this major paper on Namibia and its pre-election process, and she had all these plans. She got a grant to go study these things in South Africa. We get a call at night. Well, I'm okay. Well, are you okay? What happened? Well, I just had a fire in my room and I've lost everything. I mean, even Stanford charges $400 or $500 for the library books that were burned. You know, it's hard to explain, but I think when you have a child that had a very strong character at a very early age, and you saw that character evolve into 26, it's like sometimes things didn't surprise you. And we, I think, dealing with our 4 children, always felt our joy would be, you know, for them to have the educations they wanted, to pursue the opportunities that they were impassioned with. We were children of the civil rights movement. I had brothers in Vietnam. We had gone through some things. You know the movie The Butler? Have any of you seen that? I said, oh my gosh, that's my life, you know? And it ended on the steps of the African consulate or ambassadors in Washington, D.C. And so it was like, it was a little bit scary. I didn't even think it was a movie. I just saw sort of my life go through. And so when in times like this, we draw on who we are, what we've grown up with, what values were, what was our faith, what was our value system, why did we want our children to have the opportunities and do it. So I think you just can't discard that. I think it stays with you. And so if we hadn't maybe had some of that, maybe we would have fallen apart. I think the other thing is, people tried to make us fall apart. Reporters, and they'd stick a microphone in you and they'd say, aren't you angry, Mrs. Beale? And that like made me angry at them. You know? It was a lot of little stuff. But it was painful. And of course, the more I learned about the pain that went on in those very streets in Guguletu, I realized I can't walk in their shoes. I don't know whether I would have survived, but maybe I can walk beside them. And so I think it came together and with the TRC being an institutionalized process, which helped get it out, but it also comes together in some kind of a natural way. When Tobacco and Easy had a meeting with all their youth group, and they had kids from their town come and meet us. They wanted us to see what they were doing with the kids before they joined the foundation. They had a little program on their it was like a table like this, and I picked it up, and it said Master of Ceremonies, welcoming, dance, and then it says, Linda Beale, Mrs. Linda Beale, mother of us all. A little farther down I read, Peter Beale, father of us all. Tell us of your experiences. I just realized there's very little difference between my children and Tobacco and those there that day. And we were kind of adopted. So when I go through all that, you don't see the anger. You feel the sadness. You feel the void for people not being here. But so much has happened to fill a lot of that void. I don't know if that helps or not.
My name is Barbara McElroy, and I have 2 comments. One, I'm the mother of 6, and what you've just explained is something I had thought about earlier. I don't know if I would have responded that way, but yet it is true because in other circumstances, those long-held values do come through even in tragedy and trauma and things. But then also, I'm not pronouncing your name, Nabeko. When you said it was difficult, you went through that courageous self-searching, but it just makes me more aware that you wanted to change, but you needed support, and there were people there to support you. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us, that we need to do that. And I'm so touched. The mother of us all, the father of us all. That's just a beautiful statement.
I've hardly told that to anybody, but it was very important.
And another comment. So often we think of grandfathers and parents giving a legacy to their children and their grandchildren, and yet your daughter has really given you something that you in turn can pass on to the ages. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And actually, I want to follow up with something to try to put it in a broader context. Manfred, we were just hearing about Linda's emotional journey and dealing with, a change in life and changing. And we know that when Nelson Mandela went to prison, he went in as a militant, and yet we mostly think about him as a great reconciler, as a man of peace. What do we know about the emotional journey that he took during that time in prison that took him from being a militant, someone who's very active in not only in protest but in violence, even embracing violence, to being the person who actually wraps his arms and teaches us all how to forgive?
Certainly. The one thing that one need to understand first and foremost is in 1961, when the military wing of the ANC in Mkhonto weSizwe was formed, from the outset, they said, we will not cause any life. We don't want to take any life. This is the last resort. Up till that point, government don't want to engage, don't want to listen, in fact, killed many Africans and people of color in general. And a decision was made, we need to change our stance, we need to do something. So, albeit that Madiba, yes, there was a lot of violent crimes, explosions and things like that. He was never the militant in terms of we want to take lives. And even when he went to prison, I mean, even before 64, but in 64 in particular, when he went to prison, it was always, how do we change? Prison wanted to change him, but Madiba was very stubborn, let me tell you that. There was a time the officials told him, or he told the officials rather, he said, if you ask me to move from point A to point B, he said, I will do so, but I will determine the pace. And that is significant. He determined what will happen next. He determined, I need to change. And in 1988, as Tobacco said, the ANC, his own people, his own organization, and other organizations, they really thought he have sold us out. He, the person who started, who introduced, who was the first commander-in-chief of Mkhonto weSizwe, want us now to change. They said, we will rather take up the arms, we will fight till the bitter end. He then responded by saying, if you truly want to change people, don't attack their brains. He said, rather attack their hearts, because once you're in their hearts, then you can start to move the furniture. They could not understand it, but it was the right thing to do. So I'm not sure if I responded to your question, but that's really
wonderful. Thank you for that. Another question? We have some people down front here.
Linda, so nice to meet you. I'm going to battle to pronounce your name. Say it for me.
Ntobeko.
Okay, and Manfred. Manfred's easier. My name's Julie and I'm South African. And it didn't, it struck me that we're the same age, the three of us. So you were growing up in one part of South Africa and you were in another part and I was in Johannesburg. And I'm an emotional South African. When Mandela died, I thought long and hard, and I thought, he allowed white people not to feel ashamed. He did the reconciliation that the Truth and Reconciliation did, because we've carried a big burden too, because we were ashamed by silence. So thank you for sharing. And it wasn't lost on me that we were all the same age. You know, it's so amazing how the circle of life.
Thank you for that. I think we have a question over here.
Well, now I'm all emotional and forgot what I was going to say. Let me just say that I have two questions, but first I want to say I first became aware of the situation in South Africa in the early 60s. I was on a picket line with the American Committee on Africa against the Chase Manhattan Bank about investing, or they should divest, in South Africa. And this was 20 years before the students in our country finally caught on. And so I have a long sense of devotion on this subject. I'm 73 now, and I thought when you were talking first, Linda, about Bishop Tutu, or Archbishop Tutu, that I would also love to hear from the others in terms of what they know about him, because I just find him incredibly special. I've also tried to see all the films that have come out of South Africa about the Truth and Reconciliation work, the documentaries and so forth. I've also seen One Day After Peace. Were you all in that film? I saw it a couple of years ago at a festival.
We were in Long Night's Journey into Day with 4 cases of the TRC.
Right. Oh, then I must have seen that then. And I wanted to ask about, in terms of Archbishop Tutu, he wrote a letter, an open letter to Obama about our country losing its way, basically, our moral compass. What set him off was the issue of the assassinations that President Obama was ordering, and how distressed he was about that. And I just wondered if you've ever seen that letter and what the reaction was in South Africa, and anything else you'd like to say about your interactions with him.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So whether it's in regards to the individual letter, or also just the impact that the Archbishop has had in South Africa.
But he's forever saying what's wrong to anybody. He has the ANC. I mean, right? You can tell him about what do you got? What does the ANC feel about him? Because he says what he believes is right. And when he said to us, when we spoke to him before we went to the TRC, we crossed in the air. He was not one of the judges at our case because he was coming to Sloan Kettering for cancer treatment. But we talked to him on the phone. He said, "We will be passing in the air like angels in the night," or some such poetic thing. But when you go and you speak, when it's your turn to speak at the amnesty hearing, you tell them about Amy, who she was, and you speak from your heart. And we did. We told them about Amy. And all of a sudden, these guys, I don't know, in the video, you'll see they were all sitting there like that, and they were like this. And it was my job as the mom to tell them about Amy. All of a sudden, they started looking at me. It was like we became human. She became human. He was so right. And then speaking from our heart, it's like, if we had ever had a lawyer, by the way, if any of you are lawyers here, we never have had a lawyer involved in anything about this except setting up the foundation. If we had had a lawyer, they would have said, what? Don't say a word. Don't say anything. Tutu has given me the sense of, and one of Amy's quotes was, it's about open and honest dialogue. He's as honest as he appears to be. If that's how he feels about Obama's letter, if that's how he feels about what's happened with the ANC, or whatever's happening in Belfast, he's going to say it. And he has, I think, the moral right to say it. I really do. I know you do. Yeah, maybe you guys want to tell him about your feelings about the Arch.
What I can say, strong convictions. He never keep anything back. And, he even told our president, we have prayed that apartheid will be taken away, we will also pray that you will be taken away if you don't oblige. So he's strong. He's very strong, and I have the greatest respect for the arts. You know, he's certainly in the era of Madiba. He's just a wonderful man. He's working tirelessly to bring people together of all walks of life. And perhaps I should tell the one story, which is not totally Tutu related, but you will understand. I was once told of two people who lost their fathers, and the one being a Christian and one of the Hindu faith. And on one particular day, their fathers were in the same cemetery, graveyard, and the Christian guy walked with flowers, obviously for a grave of his dad, and the Hindu guy went with a plate of food. And the Christian guy basically placed the flowers at the grave, and he then noticed how the Hindu guy placed the plate of food at the grave of his dad. And he started to laugh. And he walked across and he asked the guy, "When do you think your father will be able to eat that meal?" This guy looked up and said, "About the same time that your father will be able to smell the flowers." So that's Tutu. He always, the arts will always try and say, you know, there are no boundaries. We as a collective, as the Rainbow Nation, because he gave us that term, the Rainbow Nation. There are room in this Rainbow Nation. By the way, there are no color brown in the rainbow. So I'm considered to be brown in South Africa, but I feel, I love South Africa. Like my dear fellow South African, we just simply adore South Africa, and we are the next generation. We need to make sure that what Tutu stands for, what Madiba stood for, we need to carry it out now, certainly.
And we have time for one more question, just one last question, please. And I'll leave it up to my colleagues here to make that call.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us tonight. What you're telling me, what I'm hearing from you guys is mind-boggling. You know, that's not something that I come across and most people come across. A murderer who is reconciled with, you know, the parent of the child who was murdered. And I've listened to you tonight, and I understand. I'm trying to understand. I'm getting the idea that a lot of this, your ability to do this, came from an understanding of what comes out of this Truth and Reconciliation program, and that was a huge part of it. And your understanding of your daughter, what her passion was, and what she was trying to achieve, but I think what would help me, what I'm also interested in really knowing is, could you, actually it's a question for both of you, can you explain in this process, when you finally met and started going through this program, so you have the idea of, I want to understand where this person's coming from, and I want to already accept, and I want to do this for this cause, but at what point or what action from the other, whether it been a verbal action or a body language or something, did it go from a mental acceptance to a personal relationship, personal and relational acceptance where you could actually embrace and really truly accept this person on a personal level? Is that too much? Can you answer that? Give it like a
yeah. I mean,
I
think we both, and I'll let it. I think what we both felt with the Truth and Reconciliation process is we went as Americans who let South Africa handle all the justice part, but as American parents supporting the South African processes, we felt that it was important to attend, to respect the process. I don't think we had any idea that we would be where we are today at the process. I don't think when you went, did you have any idea? But it was an institutionalized process. I will tell you, there's one thing that South Africans do, this thing of Ubuntu. A lot of the trouble with young people, the issues that they go through, parents get involved. Parents settle arguments on the streets. Parents do it without getting police involved. It's a long process, but how they run their informal justice system in the communities is very interesting. So there were their parents, their friends, at the hearing, and you saw us with that one woman, to get to know the parents, what they were going through, was also somewhat of a key turning point, I think, for my husband and I. My husband said to one of them, he said, we're parents too. It's the love of the child. The child is abused. The child has terrible lives. You hear about TV and the African children and other children in our country and the world. And yet, children bring us together. They really do. And so I think that we had that opportunity in front of a formal sort of a justice setting to have it. The expectation was not that we have a personal reconciliation, but it gave us the opportunity, and it solidified, I think, the fact that South Africa was really trying to live out the healing of a nation. They couldn't do it perfectly, but where do we start healing? We heal within ourselves, we heal with each other, and hopefully in the bigger picture. Not every amnesty case had that kind of ending. I don't know what you want to...
Yeah. I think during the formal process, when the Beale family were presenting who Amy Beale was, showing pictures of Amy graduating at Stanford, showing pictures of Amy with the then Namibian president, it really shook me off personally as to Amy was better alive for our cause than for that death. So the more they spoke about Amy, the more we wanted to touch Amy. And in our culture, we have a game that we call stick fighting. You know, it's a very serious game where some people die as well. But if I've wounded you, I've got the responsibility to take you to the river and wash your wound in order for that wound to heal. Because if I don't touch that wound, we don't believe it's going to be healed anytime soon. So the more they spoke about Amy, the more we felt connected with Amy. Even when we invited the Beale family, when we were released out of prison, we saw them where we got home around after 2 in the afternoon. On the national headline news at 7 o'clock, there's the Beale family saying, we hope the families and communities will welcome and give them the necessary support to adjust into a new South Africa. So again, that was shocking. So when we started a youth club, when we realized the young people that were engaged in a war for independence, the only skills that they'd acquired was to maim and to injure. Well, now the country no longer required those skills. And these young people were totally disassociated with movement. The only cause they belonged to was drugs. So we tried to rally them together, take them out to Table Mountains, which was very much only a tourist attractions. So what we will do is to wait for public holidays and borrow tickets to ride a train from people who work and are off duty on those days in order to be able to go to Table Mountain. So we're trying to sort of bring young people together, because now those who commanded in the past, they were now in the new defense force, they were now in parliament, and that's it for them. We never wanted to have this personal relationship, but we invited them to come and see the work that we were doing in our own communities. So for them, it was not a question of coming to see. They showed more interest. You know, they kept asking, what's our monthly events? There were no emails back then. They were only fax. We were not even exposed to fax. So they will just keep phoning and be out. There were no cell phones as well. No. People with cell phone will be people who were...
It was very hard.
So they will be phoning at our homes, landline, and our parents will be taking the messages. Sometimes we had to write for our parents what's the agendas for this month, so that when the Beale family phones, our parents could say, well, on their menu, this is what they'll be doing on these events, you know. Yeah.
We took our jobs seriously.
I mean, our first restaurant outing at that age was through the Beale family. And I'm sure you've all taken your kids at the month of 3 months to a restaurant. For us, up until 25 years, we've never been exposed to a restaurant. And even before we went, Izzy's mom said, you will be given a menu. The menu for us was just a piece of cardboard. So when we went to a Hard Rock Cafe,
We went to the Hard Rock
the
Cafe
only one
at the
in Cape Town
waterfront in
back
Cape
then.
Town.
So we were given a menu. I said, no, I did not know it's a menu, but I said, easy, your mother said we're given such a thing. And Linda, as a mother, said, what? Well, she has this ability to pick up, even we speak in our own language, say she needs to get involved. Says, no, we don't know what's this. Okay, guys, relax, just talk. This is a menu. What options? What's going on now? We cannot be eating veggies. We're not rabbits. You know, so
They wanted meat.
Yeah. That is how we were raised, just to eat meat and that's it. No, if there's any veg that we eat, it will be potato and that's it. Any other raw veggies, it's a big no. But as we were taken by the Bill family to different restaurants, Linda somehow influenced me to start playing with different menus, you know, and I was able to do that. So even today, I walk to any restaurant and I just go through it. But one will turn to think that's expected from anyone to walk to any restaurant. But I only went to restaurant through this reconciliation process.
It was, Amy wrote in one of her journals, apartheid is like everyday living. It's about everyday living.
And sometimes we do feel Amy watches us. It's not easy. Sometimes it's very difficult. And sometimes we ask each other, how did we get over that hustle? So it's, no, you know what? Amy is around. This is what Amy wants us to do. Yeah.
It reminds me of what Manfred said, the quote from Mandela that, you know, you don't change by the mind, you change from the heart. And a lot of what you've shared with us tonight is your heart and your knowledge and your experience. And I'd like to have everyone give them a round of applause for sharing that tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming, and thank Edward Jones and Continuing Studies at Maryville for hosting this. And now I'd like to invite you all to go to the reception area. We'll have a short reception there and an opportunity to talk maybe a little bit more one-on-one and also share with each other. So thank you again for coming tonight.
She said there's something about you that really reminds me of money. She was the kind of girl that could say things that weren't that funny. I said, what does that mean? I really remind you of money.
She said,